Hi, good morning, good afternoon for those of us who are now in the afternoon session, and good evening. I think we've got some people joining us from outside the Asia Pacific region. So really exciting to have you joining us for this webinar today. So thanks everyone for dialing in. Whether you're sitting in your lounge room, your home office, whether you've made it into work, extraordinary times. And that's really the background to this webinar. It's quite straightforward. In the current environment, we're hearing all sorts of stories and approaches to managing the daily perceived changes and real changes and those impacts on businesses everywhere. And we believe there's some key facts and approaches that could help you and your organizations hold their course and still manage the changes that you no doubt seeing every day. So that's the intent of our session today. We're going to try and keep it relatively short. I'm sure you're all spending enough time online, and we want to make sure we allow some time for questions. So following the presentation, we're going to have a question and answer segment where we will answer individual questions that you can submit. So while you're listening, I encourage you to submit some questions by typing on the comment section on your screen. We'll be keeping an eye on those as they come through, and we'll answer as many of those as we can before the end of the session. So also remember, today's webinar is going to be available on demand. So you'll be able to view it again at your convenience or share it with friends and colleagues. We'll send you an email out following the webinar today. So just a couple of introductions. So your presenters today, I'm Stuart Harmon. I'm the one on the bottom of the slide there. I'm based in Sydney in Australia. I've spent 10 years with Oliver White, helping organizations improve their integration of people, processes and tools so that they can transform their business performance. I have 20 years experience prior to that in key change agent roles in major manufacturing organizations around the world. I'm very lucky and I feel privileged to be able to assist clients as they look to improve their business. Some of the clients I've worked with, Ansto, I think Fernando's on the call today, BAT, DuPont, Cochlear, Qantas, Kimberly-Clark and Danone, to name a few. I'd also like to introduce Rod Hozak, my colleague. Rod's also based in Sydney, Australia. Rod's got 15 years hands-on experience in the pharmaceutical industry and nearly 20 years now as a consultant. He's delivered many successful business improvement programs with large blue chip organizations. On his client list that includes Abbott Laboratories, BAT, Caterpillar and Fonterra, to name a few. And he's helped those companies on their journey to Class A business excellence, delivering tremendous value for them along the way. So Rod and myself have authored a number of publications. We've got a few on the screen here. To get a full list of thought leadership material that you can access from our associates around the world, feel free to visit our website. You can get free access there. There's a wide range of topics written by experienced and hands-on practitioners. So let's get into the subject matter. So a fact that we're all facing today, the unpleasant reality that what we're looking at is not business as usual. And we'd like to share a few overview thoughts before dropping into a bit more detail. As one CEO recently asked us, how do you communicate to people that you want them to continue on a business as usual basis in these circumstances? Well, the answer is that you don't, because it isn't business as usual. But we're going to present a case to you over the next 20 minutes or so that you shouldn't be confusing communication and the issue with the process. Another CEO we once worked with said about integrated business planning process, he said, don't lose sight of the fact that process is performance and performance is protection. So if we focus on the issue being different, remember that, the issue being different, there's a frightening reality that if you've never experienced this kind of environment, your intuition and experience are probably not going to be enough help to solve the problems that this new reality is causing, no matter how long you've been in business or been running your company. And regardless of the level of disruption, all decisions and plans in an organization are still linked to something. So, as an example, we're seeing consumer demand changes. Demand's up or it's down. For some organizations, it's up massively. For others, it's disappearing completely. The company's capability to ramp up or down in response. suppliers' capability and their preferences at this time. We're seeing all these things in place. So integration still matters. It's still really important, which means now is the time that we should be making our company's integration processes sweat. And it's not a time for inventing new processes. So our second fact, integration still matters. So as I said before, integration processes are more important today than ever. So on our schematic on the screen in front of you now, the integrated business planning process, the big red cog there, it still applies. Integrated business planning, or S&OP, don't really care what you call it, but it's a process where you're looking at aggregate level plan, typically 4 to 24 or 4 to 36 months into the future. So today it's likely to be quite single-minded at this point in time, but should still be looking out beyond the next 4 months. We need to work it hard by asking what-if questions, making sure there are contingency plans in place so that we can respond quickly to changing circumstances. Then we've got the integrated tactical planning process, the one with the grey cog there. Integrated tactical planning, so your weekly and daily planning execution process, should become the central command center for picking up changes and enabling you to replan early and effectively. And you'll see integrated tactical planning there is meshed with inputs from customers, suppliers, and your capability, and that's linked into consumers and suppliers. So you can see integration is still alive. Remember, it's the issue that's different, not the way change is managed, albeit we have a greater sense of uncertainty. And that's why intuition and experience don't count for much if you've never been through something like this before. So taking a leaf out of Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, it's a great read if you haven't read it, I recommend it. Daniel talks about this concept of slow thinking, and we think this is the time for slow thinking to ensure we don't regret by reacting as opposed to deliberately responding. The greatest tool we have at our disposal right now is being able to simulate multiple future scenarios for the unknowns, which we'll talk about more about later. It's important that we don't confuse the inner feeling that we should be replanning daily. A lot of people I'm talking to feel that, we've got to be looking at this stuff every minute, every hour, plan, or even hourly as things change, with the mindset of checking and adjusting daily or hourly, but doing a full stop and check in once a week. The important point is that no matter what the current conditions are, if you try and force one of the cogs in this graphic to go faster or slower than its connected cog, you'll shear off the teeth and then nothing's going to work at all. Okay, so be very, very aware of the cadence. So our next fact, agreeing assumptions is more important than ever. So as we said, experience and intuition is not going to be useful if you haven't been through this before, and the uncertainty created actually is a little bit like gambling. And yes, believe it or not, there are some rules to gambling, 5 rules in fact. I bet you didn't know that. I was sharing this with some friends, and they were saying, well, obviously the rules would be number 1, don't gamble, and number 2, don't gamble, etc. But no, there are 5 rules of gambling which I think can help us at this time. So the first rule is, when the uncertainty is high, don't invest much. The second rule of gambling is, as the uncertainty comes down, be prepared to invest a little. The third rule is, be prepared to invest to bring down the uncertainty, and that might be buying some syndicated reports, it might be spending some time on desktop research, it might be checking in on similar circumstances, epidemics, things that have happened in the past. Fourth rule of gambling, make decision-making iterative. So what does this mean in the current circumstance? So for us here, this is about continuing to run integrated business planning and integrated tactical planning processes to uptake decisions in an integrated manner. And the fifth rule of gambling, always have a backup plan, or what we'd call contingencies, to manage the most likely and impactful what-if questions. So let's have a look at a couple of examples how this could apply. So we've got our heads down and doing, we're dealing with the stuff coming in day to day. The fact is, though, that reviewing and agreeing the underlying assumptions is more important than ever. And this is akin to rule number 1. So when uncertainty is high, don't invest much. Those assumptions have to tie to where we think we're going to be in 6 months or a year's time. I know it's hard to do that right now, but it's absolutely critical because we are going to come through this and you need to be prepared for what the other side is going to look like. There's going to be bags of opportunity out there. If you're not prepared, you won't be able to respond. So these assumptions need constant review, at least monthly, but we believe with weekly check-ins to gain agreement and understanding of your collective thoughts in your organization as you know it today. So this is akin to the second rule of gambling. As the uncertainty comes down, be prepared to invest a little. Then as you know and learn more, you can start to replan with more certainty and invest more time or invest more in doing things today that are going to support that longer term view of the world. So, learn from history. And this is akin to gambling rule number 3. Be prepared to invest to bring down the uncertainty. So put time into understanding case studies such as global financial crisis, what was the response and circumstances around SARS. 9/11 was a massive disruption to the world, pilot strikes, etc. I'm sure we can think of plenty more extraordinary situations that have occurred in the recent past. So as one general manager we were talking to in Thailand recently said, look, I've been on the phone talking to my general management counterparts in our business in other countries, and I've picked up a wealth of information about what could happen here and the impact. So what are the kind of assumptions we need to explore and agree related to this? So right now they could be, well, how long do we think that the current circumstances are going to go on for? Now, for those of us who are in semi-lockdown or shutdown, or those countries or organizations where we've got complete lockdown, how long will it last? How deep are the new rules or the ways of playing the business game going to go? How much channel switching are we seeing? So where are consumers obtaining their products and services? For example, in Australia, we're seeing restaurants are shut, but supermarkets can't keep up with demand. How is consumer behavior or preference changing? What will be the long-term impact of being forced to maybe source food from supermarkets rather than spreading our spend across cafes and restaurants during the day? What are our trade-offs? So trade-offs around making our products and services available versus the cost of doing that. The point is you've got to be formally asking these types of questions, and I've emphasized formally, and then working up the simulations of the impact on the business. Simulations and contingencies are akin to the 5th rule of gambling. Always have a backup plan. So we're going to, at this point, ask our first polling question. So the polling question is now live. You should be able to see that up on the screen. So what we'd like you to just think about and come back to us on the poll is, how often are you formally reviewing your business assumptions in the current environment? And look, our emphasis here again is on formally. So just give everyone a minute or so to find the polling section. If you can give us a response, just check against, is it once a quarter, is it once a month, is it weekly, is it daily, or are you not formally reviewing your business assumptions at all? Let's give us some insight. Thank you. So this is really interesting. Thanks for those who are completing the poll. So we're seeing so 7% of respondents, or 7-8% saying not doing it at all. So there's an opportunity there for you, I think. We've got 8% who are saying, look, we're doing it daily. And look, I'd really encourage you to think about, as you identify which assumptions you need to be looking at, which ones are actually going to change daily. Okay, we've got 41% saying weekly, which is exactly where we'd be recommending you focus. We've got 33% saying once a month and 8% once a quarter. There are some things that won't be changing that rapidly. It just seems like a lot of things are changing. It might be different things changing day to day. So yeah, the bulk of you, 41% saying weekly, 33% saying once a month. That's pretty much where we'd expect you to be. But if have a formal check-in through ITP, what's changing, and then you can evaluate the impact, and you're going to be ready then, and be ready ready to respond. So our next fact is reacting and responding are different. So this might sound like semantics, but in Oliver White terms, the definition of reacting is action taken that has no plan or thinking behind it, whereas responding is action taken that has been considered and deliberately planned. Okay, so I think it's worthwhile repeating those. Action taken that has no plan or thinking behind it, that's our definition of reacting, whereas responding is action taken that has been considered and deliberately planned. So what does that mean for us right now? It means ask the what if questions, create the scenarios and plan that response to those that are most likely and most impactful. You can't plan for everything, so think about what's most likely and impactful. So why is this important? So let's do a quick pulse check. In the chat panel that you should be able to see, you write one word or phrase to describe the way you've been feeling over the last couple of weeks. We've got a few coming through. Oh, anxious, harassed, frustrated, ineffectual. Yeah, it's been a difficult time, isn't it? I think we've all felt like that. I know, I'll share. I've been feeling the same way. Well, did speak to someone the other day who said they're excited. A particular supply chain manager who was relishing the challenge. So apart from that individual, there hasn't been a lot of joy and celebration going on, has there? So we need to be wary of normal human behaviour. So when anxiety goes up or people feel threatened, and let's face it, who doesn't at the moment, we're going to automatically default to our reptilian mode of flight, fight, or freeze. So this might get people mobilized to start with, but the issue is it kills creativity and limits the ability to think through options and can completely miss capitalizing on opportunities. So to overcome this, we need to stick to the facts and develop objective models or simulations of what could possibly happen in the future. Keeping top of mind, as we said before, that it's the issues that are different, not necessarily the processes for managing them. And so you can also bring to life your company's risk management plans. Most companies have risk management as a matter of course, and then they just sit there. We would encourage companies to take that considered slow thinking in the Daniel Kahneman terms and turn the risk plans into business continuity plans. Also note that slow thinking requires far more energy than fast thinking, which is why it's all too easy to default to making those snap decisions. So let's have another crack at a polling question. Just polling questions now live. So in your organization, how quickly can you run simulations, including understanding financial impact? So please select one of days, hours, minutes, or not at all. I'll just give you a minute there to. So it's amazing how I love watching these things come through. Thanks everyone who's responding on the poll. So just over 50%, 55% of you are saying it takes you days to run simulations, including the financial impact. 30% saying hours, 4% saying minutes, or minutes is brilliant, and 8% not at all. And that could be problematic. Now we've got probably, say 60% of you saying days. And that's typical, okay? And I see lots of effort, lots of teams of people crunching information, data from different systems, and spreadsheets rear their head typically. Our question for you to consider is, how can we get that down to minutes? Now, not that we want to be continually chopping and changing our plans based on simulations, but being able to run those simulations quickly not only saves time, it helps you build objective knowledge. So thanks for everyone, but we'll close that poll now. So why are we emphasizing modeling so much? Let's take a deeper look at that. So our next fact, simulation and modeling are better predictive mechanisms than people. So there's been a wealth of information published over the last few decades showing that using algorithms and modeling to assist the prediction of the future and make decisions is actually a better approach than relying on just human judgment. especially in times when there's little previous experience. There are a couple of excellent references and studies to draw on. One of the more comprehensive books is titled Super Forecasting by Tetlock and Gardner. We've got the reference on the bottom of the screen there. And these guys make the statement that more than 200 studies have compared expert and algorithmic prediction with statistical algorithms nearly always outperforming unaided human judgment. So does that mean we let algorithms run everything? Well, no, that's not what we're recommending. Models are there to augment human judgment, and the challenge in the current environment is to develop the projections and models using human judgment to ask the right questions when setting up the modeling. So that's really important. We've got to be clear on what we want to model. For example, what do we want the scenario modeling to solve for? Do we want it to solve for product availability, delivery performance, cost, or some form of segmented customer promise? Then there are also the strategic trade-off decisions that only people can make. As one client recently said, we've been grappling with the cost of air freighting product to maintain availability versus the short-term profit loss that could occur by doing so. But there's an element of customer loyalty in there that makes it a little tricky to estimate without modeling it. When we were in industry, and it's one of Rod's examples, we use relatively simple multivariate linear models to optimize for advertising spend and market share. So look, we know this isn't related to this situation. The point is that even with that simple modeling technique, there was no way on the planet anyone could have done the maths in their head and intuited the results. Well, at least not the people in Rod's team at the time. So finally, doing this stuff in spreadsheets is a real labor of love. It'd be better to use the data in our planning systems, using the playpen, the sandpit, the scenario functionality, or whatever it's called in your planning system, to quickly play with the implications in a real environment. And hence that question about how long it takes. In this environment, you want to turn these scenarios around in minutes, really not hours or days. So our next fact, anxiety destroys creativity. So we've spoken about process and technology, but let's get back to the people elements. I know some see this as the soft part of the science of business, but this is where a bit of understanding, where with a bit of understanding, you could release a huge amount of positive energy that people are missing in this time of doom and gloom. And I think we've got some real things we can help you with here. So as we mentioned earlier, the fact is that anxiety destroys creativity. In a small amount of anxiety, frustration, and uncertainty, or even a small amount of anxiety, frustration, and uncertainty, results in only 3 human responses: fight, flight, or freeze. The evidence is overwhelming, and yet we see people every day being argumentative, contradictory, dismissive, resistant, inert, sometimes going missing in action, and at times downright rude. And we kind of go, well, that wasn't so good. But I'm sure they'll snap out of it eventually. The fact is that this is an unacknowledged threat response. And not only does it stimulate our reptilian brain for fight, flight, freeze, it actually turns off our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for critical thinking, being creativity, exploring options, and strategizing. And here's the kicker. The ill will that this behavior causes can last a long time, weeks and even months, which further exacerbates the slippery slide into negativity. People have long memories. There is, however, a role for a negative mindset, and that is it could be a mobilizer, such as if the building's on fire, you'd be worried and anxious and single-minded about getting out of the building really, really quickly. After that, however, when the problem is gone, it stops motivating you to action. So what have we seen? We've seen companies actually cancelling their IBP meetings, creating senior executive war teams, and inventing new crisis teams and crisis processes when the mechanisms are already in place. So our strong recommendation is to resist the temptation to cancel your S&OP or integrated business planning and integrated tactical planning meetings and processes. If anything, you need to tighten them down and pack down harder by deliberately keeping the medium to long-term planning forums and processes, understanding that there is uncertainty, and creating a safe environment to be able to communicate what you do not know on equal weighting with what you do know. One of our clients canceled their management business review, in their words, because they didn't know whether their customers were shutting down or not. But our response to this was to say that next month there's still going to be uncertainty, and what they've effectively just done is to lose a whole month in collectively understanding the state of play. So our advice is stay true to the process. Remember, process is performance and performance is protection, and it's the issue that's different. So let's explore some of the mechanisms you can use to generate some of that positive and creative energy. So the evidence here is really compelling. Positivity drives creativity. As an example of what can happen, we recently asked an Asia Pacific regional director, how's the current environment impacting you? He told us all the important stuff about protecting people and the restructure they're enacting. But when we asked, so are there any opportunities popping up and how are you managing them? He looked at us strangely and said, we've been so busy in locking down that we haven't even broached any opportunities. But yes, one of our categories is dead, but there's another category showing an upward trend. He then thanked us and said that he had to go and talk to his team right now. So that's the anxiety coming out. But even if it's nicely kept under control, it's simmering below the surface and will blindside you. So what are a few things you can do right now to increase positivity and explore the options? So literally ask your people, start meetings with a question, what went well today? Or what went well this week or this month? And that you'd like to share with the team. Right? That gets people in that positive mindset. Another very useful technique is to move the conversations from problem-focused to solution-focused quickly. Also, show people who currently play lead roles in your IBP and integrated tactical planning processes that you trust them to use their respective processes to facilitate management of this serious and important issue. This is what the processes are designed to do, so leverage them hard. Can you imagine how engaged these people are after the lead team take over their role and start to reinvent processes that are already in place? So if you're a senior leader listening to our webinar today, really think about that one. You've got good people, they've got good process, get out of the way and let them use it. Think and act positive leadership, which amongst other things is comprised of creating strong connections in teams, elevating the energy and continually steering the team from thinking problems to exploring the solutions. As one of the great lecture series called The Art of Critical Thinking demonstrates, if you want to be creative in your solutions, you must first generate options. To check in on how you went, a really simple but great question to ask at the end of the meeting or gathering, and you could use this in your IBP meeting critiques if you're operating IBP, is on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is feeling totally de-energized, where 5 is feeling neutral, and 10 is feeling totally re-energized, ask the participants, how is your energy level now compared to when we started the meeting? This then puts the onus on the leader of each meeting to keep the energy positive and elevated. And before you jump to say, look, Stuart, that's really just soft and fluffy stuff, remember there is hard science behind these approaches. Finally, we say, keep calm. But there needs to be a deliberate strategy to gauge people's emotions and cleave out time to routinely assess and anticipate future events. As one of our clients in Singapore said recently, while everyone is a little stressed, we're keeping calm. We're objectively assessing each new fact as it's presented and leveraging our integrated tactical planning process to respond appropriately. So let's summarize with a look at some of the other practical things we can get tighter on. So make sure the fundamentals are in place. I know this is Business Management 101, but remember, if the foundations are weak, then so too is what you're building them on. So tight agendas and meeting discipline, really important. Focus on reviewing those critical few assumptions routinely, run your simulations often, and define clear decision points and decision-making guidelines. And then work on strengthening them each cycle. Remember, it's the issue that's changed, not how it's managed. And so with the last word before questions, so there's a phrase coined, and this is one that Rod provided us from his medical days. If you focus all your energy on treating the symptoms of fever, you'll never develop the vaccine. It's quite pertinent for the crisis we're in at the moment. So our challenge to you is, what are you doing now to anticipate the future and create the recovery for your business? So thanks everyone. That's the that's the end of our presentation. Apologies again that we ran into a few technical issues. We've got some time for questions. Well, for those who like to stay on, we've got some time for questions. If you need to leave, we fully understand. But let's have a look at some of the questions that you're able to send through. One that we've picked up here. So we've got, so what do you do if we don't have an existing formal integrated business planning or S&OP or integrated tactical planning process? Look, I think in that instance, the things that we referred to in the last slide. So in terms of pulling a tight agenda together for getting the key players in the organization together to work through an integrated response to the circumstances that you're facing is really important. And putting the effort into assumptions, right? You need to take a view on what you think the multiple outcomes could be in the external environment and for your business, because if you don't take a view, no one else will. And it's really important that then they provide the basis for how you may react. And this is all about getting ready. As we said earlier, you don't want to react. You'll get better outcomes if you're ready to respond. And you might have plan A, plan B, plan C, and plan D all prepared, all ready to go. It means you will get first mover advantage over the competition, and you'll get better outcomes. So look, apologies that we've run a little bit over time. What we'll do is collect those questions. We'll work on those offline. We'll pull a bit of a Q&A, a written piece together, and we'll make that available to you when we send you the details of how you can log in and obtain the webinar on demand. So thanks everybody. If you're continuing your morning or getting into your evening, or you're going to head off and have some lunch, thanks for joining us. We're here if you want to ask us any questions. Just on our last slide, we've got contact details, so you can contact us through our website. We've got the information at oliverwhite-ap.com, or Rod or I very happy to take phone calls or send us an email. You've got the details there. Please reach out if you'd like some help, and stay safe. Best wishes to you and your families, and yeah, we'll talk to you sometime in the near future, hopefully. Thanks everybody.